It's that time again, a new console generation. And this time Compile Heart and Idea Factory have decided to go in early. It's not even been a year since the PS5's launch, and now we have the first Neptunia PS5 game. It's Neptunia ReVerse, or ReVerse. In the title screen it's pronounced ReVerse, so I guess I'll pronounce it that way. Idea Factory sent me a code for the game, which was very nice of them, thank you very much. I also bought the limited edition myself, so we'll take a look at that too a little bit later on in the video. As the name doesn't suggest, ReVerse is an updated version of Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1. Originally a Vita game, it later came out on Steam, and in Japan there was a PS4 version also, which we didn't get in the West. So in other words, this isn't a new game, but a new version of the remake of the first Neptunia game. In this video we'll take a look at Neptunia ReVerse, which for the most part is almost identical to Rebirth 1. But there are some added gameplay elements which we'll get into in the review. And also, just so you know, ReVerse includes all the DLC content and characters of Rebirth 1. For those of you who are new to the series, I'll give you a bit of background information on what Neptunia is about. The idea of it is to personify the console wars in a fantasy/sci-fi setting. The world is called Game Industry and it has 4 goddesses: Neptune, Noir, Blonde, and Vert. While they each represent a brand these days, back in the first couple games, they represented certain consoles specifically. Neptune is a parody of the never-released Sega Neptune, Noir the PS3, Blonde the Wii, and Vert the Xbox 360. They all preside over their own land. Neptune's is Planeptune, Noir's is Last Station, Blonde's is Louis, and Vert's is Leanbox. The goddesses compete with each other for shares. Shares represent the amount of belief the populace has in their goddess. That share energy allows them to transform in order to become even more powerful. Not only do they change their appearance after transformation, but their voices become deeper and their whole personality becomes more mature. They have different names in what is called HDD mode. Neptune, Noir, Blonde, and Vert become Purple Heart, Black Heart, White Heart, and Green Heart. The goddesses have various personality traits and also physical attributes that reference their real-life counterparts. For example, Noir acts quite aloof and sure of herself. Blonde is small and often seen as a child, just like how Nintendo consoles are sometimes considered for children, and also, they have a reputation for being underpowered. And Vert's more full figure reflects the more powerful hardware of the Xbox, specifically the first one and the 360, which usually had the best console ports of their generation. Not to mention that whole huge like Xbox thing. Honestly, I'm not sure what they parodied exactly with Neptune's character, but my theory is because the Sega Neptune was supposed to be a 2-in-1 system. That's why they made Neptune have such a silly personality normally, and then a very mature and confident attitude after transforming. That sort of duality and contrast seems to be a trait that other Planeptune goddesses have too, like Plutia and Iris Heart and also Uzume and Orange Heart. The story in ReVerse and effectively Rebirth 1 goes like this. We see the goddesses fight. Conveniently, there's a bit of banter, which provides the player with a bit of info. As they talk, they agree to gang up on Neptune and effectively try to get rid of her. Though the eyes in the background above the characters suggest some sort of external force influencing the events. Neptune falls from the sky and goes unconscious. Compa, who is a nurse, finds her and explains that she found her falling from the sky and brought her into her house. But because of the fall, or more likely the landing, Neptune can't remember a thing and seems to be suffering from amnesia. Later on, they stumble across IF, and she ends up joining the party too. From there on out, they go on adventures and quests. Along the way, they find out about an adversary called R4 that threatens all of game industry. Neptune's group travel to the other nations in order to convince the goddesses to join them in saving the world. Neptunia games feature a lot of references and breaking of the fourth wall. Since the game is effectively a remake of the first game, you'll even see Neptune mention how the events don't play out the same. While the humor is often silly and lighthearted, Neptunia games do have a serious side that makes the story much more engaging than if everything, was just silly shenanigans. Let's move on to gameplay now. The game is divided into several dungeons. You have a map of the world where you can see the dungeons as well as all the countries. Each land has their basilicom where you can view story events, check for quests, and buy items. The dungeons are where you do all the running around and fighting. It's a classic turn-based JRPG system. Running into enemies in the dungeons will start the battles. If you hit them in advance, you get an advantage, but if they manage to get you from behind or as you're swinging, then the enemies attack first. You can have 4 party members active. Rebirth 1 only allowed 3, by the way. Party members follow you around in the dungeon, which is a feature present in the PS4 version of the game and also as DLC on the Steam version. It's just graphical, so you don't have to worry if they come in contact with an enemy. You can do normal and special attacks. There are 3 types of normal attacks. They are Rush, Power, and Break. Rush is a series of fast attacks that's particularly useful against enemies that you can't get many hits on. You know, like in the beginning of Morrowind, where you miss your opponent like 69% of the time. Power is good against enemies where that isn't the case, and it's especially useful for dispatching low-level enemies quickly. Break attacks, meanwhile, are good against powerful enemies with high defense. Once you whittle away enough of their guard meter, then your attacks do more damage. But in practice, I've found out that Rush is usually the only kind of attack you really need. You can use Power for really weak enemies perhaps, but I almost never use break attacks. Special attacks use up SP. I say attacks, but they aren't necessarily offensive. Depending on the characters, you can also heal party members or enhance certain stats, for example. If the character is a goddess, they can also transform. You do spend SP in order to transform, but it makes them stronger by upping their stats. Items can be used to heal, replenish SP, revive fallen characters, and cure status ailments. You can move characters around within a radius. It's kind of like a Quest 64 style thing. The box in front of the characters is the hitbox for your attacks. This box is different depending on the character as well as the weapon equipped. For example, Uni uses a gun and therefore her attacks land farther away. That's good of course for opponents that are too far to walk up to. Special attacks usually also have unique hitboxes. There's a game mechanic called Lily Rank. Yuri is the Japanese word for Lily, so guess what Lily Rank is? Yes, it's a relationship system between the playable characters. Even though you only have 4 active party members, each girl can have a support character though. They don't actively fight in battle, but they gain experience and over time their relationship will improve. You gain access to support abilities and special attacks eventually. The remake system is worth talking about. It's a way to gain items, dungeons, and even change the balance of the game. And that also includes changes in the monsters in the dungeons and various things regarding difficulty. You need plans for these specific things and you can get them when you play the game. There's various ways to obtain them. Once you have the plan, you need to fulfill certain criteria, which can be having certain items or having a certain amount of shares and things like that. You'll need to make use of the system if you want to get all the achievements. But if you don't want to fumble around with it too much, then you don't really need to touch this system, just so you know. Neptunia ReVerse does feature some new things in the gameplay department. You can go fishing, the mechanics are quite simple and it does make use of the PS5's fancy triggers. You can get items and sometimes you have to fight whatever it is you caught. There's different fishing rods and bait. It's not really the most thrilling addition ever, but I guess it exists. Something a bit more interesting is arrange mode. You're gonna have to start a new game and, have a separate save game for this. Here you have access to all 27 playable characters right from the beginning. There's also adjustments to the game balance. The website lists exactly what's been tweaked, but essentially you're stronger and have more items right from the start. The story is still the same though. Arrange mode is mainly for people who already have played Rebirth 1. Let's talk about graphics. This probably won't surprise you, but there isn't much positive to say. Rebirth 1 was a Vita game originally, and it shows. Yes, the game runs at 4K, there's shaders and stuff, and ooh, look, there's reflections. But it's not a good looking game considering the system it's running on. In fact, there's loads of previous gen Nep games that look better than this. V2 and V2R, For Goddesses Online, and the recently released Virtual Stars are all better looking on the PS4, even if perhaps the performance isn't always there. V2 on the Switch looks better in many ways too. It's quite a missed opportunity to refresh Rebirth 1 for the next gen. For example, they could have made the dungeons look nicer while still retaining the layout. How about some better textures? Why not have proper transformation sequences? The Rebirth games never had those. Even the pre-rendered cutscenes in the beginning of the game are still Vita spec. It's not great. I noticed that they did change a lot of menus and HUD stuff from Rebirth 1. There's a lot of diamond-shaped elements throughout, which seems to be taken from V2R. There's new illustrations at the guild and shop with Compa and Iffy. And also in the in-game menu, the one that you bring up by pressing triangle. That one has a rotating set of illustrations, which is kind of cool. There's a few older ones as well as some newer ones. I like these changes as the Rebirth games were made for portable screens and therefore menus and HUD elements were a bit too large. But ReVerse does a better job of utilizing larger screens, so that's an improvement. But other than that, why is this even a PS5 game to begin with? Surely the PS4 would be able to handle all of those things, no worries. Overall, it feels like they made it a PS5 game just so they can say Nep is on the PS5 now. Surely they could have saved the potential hype that statement could have generated for an actual original game. Or at the very least, they should have upped the graphics considerably. At this point, Neptunia fans need something to get excited about. The series had such good momentum with the release of V2, and then after V2R, things just tapered off. I don't mind the spin-offs personally, but we need some new original mainline games. There's no need to remake and remaster everything all the time at this point. I guess all the backtracking makes the title ReVerse appropriate. In terms of sound and music, I reckon everything is adequate. When the game came out, I really liked the soundtrack, but now I'm so used to hearing the music. I should mention there are a few new songs and arrangements though, so that's nice. There's a good mixture of electronic and also, bits of rock and metal here and there. Plus, of course, there's, situational music for cutscenes. One thing to note is that the English dub uses the original Rebirth 1 voiceovers. So in other words, Noir and Vert are still voiced by Aaron Fitzgerald and Tara Platt. I guess that makes sense because, there's no new content here. Unlike, V2R where they had the VR events, so they couldn't use Aaron Fitzgerald's voiceovers, if the voice actor just suddenly changed in the VR cutscenes. Let's take a look at the limited edition. I got this from the Idea Factory online store. Strangely, the game, which is my very first physical PS5 game by the way, doesn't have a spot inside the LE box. I'm not really a fan of that, I think it should house that. The game cover features some cleavage censorship. This has been the case with Western Nep releases since the very first PS3 game, but it's the first time seeing an actual outfit alteration in a mainline title. The only other instance was on the Hyper Devotion Noir cover. Don't worry though, it's just the cover. The actual game isn't censored. The cover image is new. I like that they didn't recycle the art there. There's already enough of that going on with the game. Looks like the Neptunia font has changed. There has been two other designs with the mainline games. First was the Nisa era version. Then it changed when Idea Factory took over publishing. And now ReVerse has this slightly more pointy typeface. The back cover design is quite good without too much clutter. There's also decent sized screenshots. Opening the thing up reveals an uncensored disc as well as the reversible cover art. The reversible cover is the same as the front, except it's just, not covered there at the cleavage. So you can just flip it around for full authenticity. I got two trading cards, one is of Iris Heart and the other shows Nep in regular and HDD mode. There was supposed to be like a third card, but Idea Factory accidentally didn't send it. They did send it out now though. I got an email there. The card is exclusive to this LE and it has Noir on it in her Victory/Rebirth 3 outfit. I quite like the LE box. There's new art again here. The four goddesses are here in the center and the CPU candidates are up there too. The back isn't too exciting, but it features a design that we often see in the games. When you open it up, you can see that each side has a goddess, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see a bit of design in such places. The first thing in the box is a poster of the game case illustration, minus courtesy flaps, thankfully. The back image is perhaps not the most displayable thing ever at first glance, but then again everything's covered so it should be fine. Underneath we have a steel case. Again, it's the game cover art. The metallic elements look pretty cool and it works with the sci-fi look the games have. Inside we have a diamond-shaped design with the words Neptunia ReVerse. Not bad looking, but honestly I always keep my disc in the original case, so I'm not going to really use it. Underneath that there's a soundtrack. The front cover shows the four goddesses. In fact, they are taken from the LE box, but just repositioned. On the back we have the little sisters just hanging out at the top. Inside we have more diamonds and D-pads. There's two sheets of stickers. One has a few different designs. The second one is a purple and white image of Purple Heart. I think it's pretty cool. Lastly, with the limited edition, it's the hardcover art book. Normally ones with a big spine like this are a pain to flip through, but the binding is done in such a way that you can actually have it open without feeling like you're destroying it. It has the usual character profiles, but it also shows you art and covers from all previous Nep games. It's a bit like a retrospective. It is cool, though I have all of them except for the super rare Rebirth 1 limited edition, so it's easier for me to just look at my Neptunia shrine. One thing this art book also kinda highlights is how Tsuneko's art style has evolved over the years. Her illustration from like 10 years ago are noticeably different than the ones now. So that's the limited edition. I like it overall. Pretty standard set of items, but it all looks good. And there's new art specific to the game, and it's a nice thing to display. So in the end, what do I think? Well, if you have a PS5 and find yourself wanting to get into the series, then I recommend Neptunia ReVerse. It's the best looking and most extended version of the game, but given the somewhat expensive price of $50 US, it may make more sense to wait for a Steam sale. Sometimes you can get all 3 Rebirth games at a much cheaper price, and that includes the DLC. Plus, if you're starting with the Steam version, then you don't have a sudden decrease in visuals going from ReVerse to either the PC or Vita version of Rebirth 2 and 3. If you're a veteran of the series, then I can't really recommend Neptunia ReVerse. I don't think the extra features are enough, unless you were planning on replaying the game anyway. Since I collect the limited editions of Nep games, I ended up getting the game, so if you're a collector, then you probably did the same thing. So that's my opinion on Neptunia ReVerse. Let me know what your impressions are after seeing this video. I hope that was entertaining and or helpful. If you want, you can support me by becoming a member over at patreon.com/ysn. You'll get news and you can also see videos before they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.